Okay, as you've seen, at least as you've heard in the theme, this synthesizer is particularly adept at making analog drum sounds. And I'm told by its creator that originally that's what it was intended for. And it works very well for that. I have never been a big analog drum creator because I've never been really satisfied with the way that most, especially vintage analog synths, end up just making sort of a hum-tish sound that I've never been into. I always wanted something more beefy, something more aggressive, more in your face, more like an 80s sample sound than a 1970s boom-tish sound. So this synthesizer has been fantastic for me in regard to just coming up with drums. I'm going to try and do that right now on the fly in real time so you can see basically how easy it can be and at least give you sort of a tour of how to generate, how to start generating analog drum sounds with this synthesizer. Okay, we're going to use the sequencer, of course. So let's get that going. Okay, right now we're hearing VCO1, which is relatively low. Both controls for both oscillators are all the way down, so all we're really hearing the sequencer do is open up the amp right now. It's triggering both envelopes and it's opening the amp, and that's all it's really doing. It is, however, controlling the filter, and these values are affecting the filter value, but we'll get to that. Right now what I've done is I've taken oscillator 1, which is the only oscillator on. I have it set to the square wave, which is deep and boomy. I have the pulse width all the way to the left, which is the bassiest setting. And beyond that, not much else is going on except for right over here. This is where the envelope as a modulation source to the pitch is valuable. I have the first envelope controlling the pitch of oscillator 1, and you may not be able to notice it because it's so low, but that's where we want it. Here, I'll give you a demonstration though that'll give you a clue as to what's really happening. So it's basically making it not a tonal sound. So we're not getting a dun, we're getting a which is of course what we want from a bass drum. So let's do a thing where we do this. Just by turning this value down, we can hear it immediately turn into more of a bass drum sound. And we can fine tune this. This right as it is certainly a suitable analog bass drum sound, and it's not a big drony, boomy, not drum sounding analog sound. It actually sounds like a decent bass drum, but we can mess with that a little bit to get what we want. Let's hear how it sounds if we turn it lower. That's pretty good. So that's decent. Let's see what happens if we turn up the envelope modulation. Kind of takes the bass out of it a little bit. So there. There's our bass, and that's cool. But, oh, it looks like we also have some filter modulation going on here. So I guess that's what we want. So by adjusting envelope 2, we could make it more boomy if we wanted it. Let's turn that back down a little bit. So it becomes sort of a shuffling game about how much you want the filter to do a particular thing. Okay, right now we are filtering away most of the upper frequencies present in the oscillator. And I'm going to add to the oscillator by going up here to the mixer and turning up the noise. Now that is having an effect, so let's turn this down a little bit more so we don't hear that as much. Okay, now what we want is a snare, right? You'll notice I haven't really done anything with how much the sequencer is controlling the frequencies of the oscillator. We don't really need to, but we may experiment a little bit when we're working with a snare. So let's see what our snare sounds like just as it is. And you're like, well, how are you going to add a snare on here? And the trick is simply to change the values of the sequencer, which is really controlling the filter cutoff point. We did this. No, that would be ridiculous. Let us not do that. Okay. Anyway, so now we have, actually, that's a snare. I bet we could get something a little more fun than that. Let's see what happens when we turn up the filter modulation using audio range oscillator 1. We're losing some of the bass in our bass drum, so maybe we could see if we can turn down still better without it. A little bit of that is nice. And let's bring in oscillator 2. And let's add what I've done is I have used envelope 2 to control the pitch of oscillator 2, and by turning that up, we're getting a little bit of a punch that's in the low mid range, which gives us a little more punch. And let's see, what other experiments can we do? Pulse width modulation might do something interesting. Or not at all. Okay, that's going pretty well. Let's try to see what happens. Sometimes when we add the sub oscillator, things get really nice. Yeah, we got a little extra bass in there. Our snare sounds a little more. Wow, that's like kind of a crash instead of a snare. Well, that is an example. There are certainly more examples of bass drum and snare sounds I've created in the sequencing video, but that's kind of giving you an idea of the sort of thinking that will guide your process when you're creating drum sounds. I'm not as happy with this snare as I have been with other snares I've made, but it is kind of, I have to say, it's kind of an experimental process for me. To find out, you know, sometimes I'm not entirely sure where I'm going with it, and then I come up with great results. But there are plenty of examples of different drum sounds, and it's really capable of a tremendous array of drum sounds, especially if you're not sequencing. But here's a way to get a, you know, basic, nice drum backing sequencing track relatively quickly. But And you can also do, as you've heard actually in the theme, I did the same process over and over and over again to create a wide variety of sounds, including sort of hi-hat sounds or high-end rhythmic sounds. And it's so versatile that you can get a tremendous array of different types of drum sounds out of it. There you can hear I've kind of put a sort of a Simmons electronic drum sound into the snare. And I've just done that by messing with the degree to which the sequencer controls the pitch of oscillator 2. So at this amount, the low is creating a low note, but then the high is whipping it up to a high note, which is being modulated by the envelope 2 pitch-wise. A pitch envelope is created to this degree. You could turn it up, of course. But I'm mostly happy with it right around there. And you can change it by, of course, controlling the release, which defines how long the sound is in this case. Ooh, that's kind of cool. So yeah, you can, just with a little bit of experimentation, you can find some really incredible sounds. And of course, this is also true, as you'll see in the sequencer videos. Like you can change these in real time to make it more of a musical performance. But yeah, I'm still manipulating the same few knobs in order to just fine-tune that snare a little bit. Anyway, so yeah, have a listen to the other examples of drums I've made with this in the sequencing video and also in the theme song to this whole video series.